I'll just get some housekeeping bits and pieces out of the way. In the event of the fire alarm going off, 2 exits at the back, or you could go that way also. I'm just going to do a very short introduction, then hand over to an interview. Some of you will have seen interviews already on the screen. We were able to interview some of our older members who've got excellent memories and can share something of the remarkable story of the history of Heath Church. As I said this morning, if we travelled back in time to the 11th of November 1900, you'd be sat on an empty space. There was no church building here. But there was a man of remarkable vision, John Pugh, who was part of the Presbyterian Forward Movement, and it was he who had the idea that he wanted churches, small halls, built into the communities that are expanding around South Wales. A lot of industrialisation, and obviously here in Cardiff, we were moving towards the edge of what's known as the city. You can see that over there. So I'm not going to go into great detail about what you can find, but really just point you towards one or two things. The 125 years is not a story of us. It's really a story of God's keeping grace and his goodness towards us. So from the very beginning, the view was we wanted to have a place of worship that really met the needs of the community, the spiritual needs primarily, but there were some other practical things again. So in 1900, the hall at the back was built following a tent missions. Seth Joshua, a very famous evangelist, a man of great spiritual conviction, who was very, very bold. There's one story that's told of him really going out into enemy territory. And John Pugh was cut from a similar cloth. They're the kind of men that would go out into a very difficult situation. It's one story of going to an event up in a very difficult part of South Wales. I won't mention it in case somebody comes from there. And when he turned up to speak, there was no one else. No one else had the bravery to stand with him. But he was a man of wisdom as well. And he saw a bunch of young fellas and he went to them and he said, I want to preach today. I'm just a poor sinner like you. Will you stand with me? So he got some of the kind of local ruffians to stand with him and protect him. And then he preached very powerfully. But these are the kind of men that were prepared to be brave, prepared to be bold. Within 5 years of the Heath Hall opening with just 18 members, we had the building of this building that we're in, this premises that we're in, over 250, a period of what we would call revival, when God really works powerfully by his Spirit, from 18 to 100 to 250 and more. So it's a remarkable account. Over there on that board is largely the opening of the hall, the development of the church. Some of those spiritual experiences are mentioned. The two boards either side refer World War I and World War II. The plaque on the wall, some of us might have sat under that plaque or passed it by for many years. Some information, I'm indebted to Nick Davey for some of the research that he's done on that, as we're indebted to the work of the late Leighton Hargest, who had a tremendous ability to gather historical materials, and we've got an archive towards the rear of the church, which he kept remarkably complete, and we've accessed some information there. We're greatly indebted to him. And then if you travel into the lecture room behind, there you will find some more information, images. Plus, if I can mention, we've got a book here, which if you've come to the Heath before, well, I ought to say it's lovely if you've come for the first time ever today. But this is a book, Important Special Memories of Heath. If you've come over the years, perhaps fill in just a few sentences of something that has been important to you in terms of coming to Heath Church, and that will be something then that in due time we'll put into the archive for future generations to be encouraged by. So we're going to hand over in a moment to the interview with Keith Batstone. I won't say how old he is, but one of our mature members, again, careful, yes, with a remarkable tale to tell. And then after that, you can just spend as much time as you like looking at the exhibits. There are some people here who can fill in the missing details because some of them were on boys' camp for many years, or they were doing other camps or Sunday schools. So if you see someone around who seems to be knowledgeable, ask them questions. You might spot a couple of errors. And people have come to me already this morning and queried something, and that's absolutely fine, because your personal story will help us fill in some of those details. The coffee shop, I think, will remain open, and then there's also an internationals element where there's some interesting work on how the message has gone out of Jesus Christ's saving grace to nations around the world and people coming here. So I'm going to hand over to Alistair and to Keith for an interview over some memories. Thank you.
Thank you, Hal. Well, can I add my welcome to everybody? It's good to have you here, and it's a thrilling weekend to be part of this and to realise that our story, our later story, even Keith's later story, and as part of the church. I think you're probably half of your life has been, or half of the whole history of the church you've been around. Me less so, but still a long time, since 1966. But you definitely predate me. But there's history even before that, and it's been wonderful to sort of reflect on that and see how all of us are brought together that have been a part of this church or a connection with this church, or even just visiting it today. And we're all connected with the work of God that's been carried out, that the Lord has done over those 125 years. And so we're going to zoom in and learn a little bit about Keith's time. And whilst I've known you since I suppose probably since 1966 in reality, that it's possible still to learn about each other, isn't it? Because we don't know, we haven't heard all the stories. So it's looking forward to this. It's a wonderful thing. So we'll start back at the beginning. When did you first come to the church?
Probably in 1948, when I was 4. My parents and I lived in Canada Road with my grandparents. Not an uncommon arrangement, really, after the war. I can't say I was sent to the Sunday school, but certainly it would have been like that at first, but it's something I enjoyed coming to. Lots of children went to Sunday school in those days, and a lot of my friends from school would have been here, so I was very happy to come. My parents would have been happy with that, my dad especially would have encouraged it, but it was not a problem to me.
So moving on quickly, because we don't have a huge amount of time, do we? How did you become a Christian?
Okay, well, I went to Sunday school during my childhood and youth. Never had a problem with believing in God and believing the gospel stories about the Lord Jesus. This was an evangelical church then, and so I would have learned in a children's way the stories of the Bible. From the age of 12, I would say, I did come under conviction of sin. I wasn't going to the church, it was a Sunday school thing for me, but I did become aware of sin. In part, one of the boys in my year in high school moved me to think, just by his actions, how was I living? And conviction of sin came, and I felt very certainly that I was a sinner and that I was to be judged. So at start age of 12, just kept coming to the Sunday schools in the afternoon, and then when I was mid-teens and so on, we had a Sunday school teacher who would seek to engage you in discussion and conversation and make you think. I was drawn into the Boys Brigade Company by Sunday school contemporaries who urged me to do that. which I did, and from about the age of 14, and enjoyed it, enjoyed the company, enjoyed the things we did. They also then further challenged me to go to the Boys Brigade camp with them. I'm not a camper, not a holiday I would ever choose and have ever done, although I ended up for yonks running the boys' camp in West Wales. So I went to the camp and listening to the gospel. And I was aware from the year before I had been moved to think, well, I should become a Christian in the evangelical term, as it were, the biblical way. I didn't. This particular year, again, I was moved by the gospel, had a very clear feeling, if you don't come to the Lord this year, you may never. So one evening I went to see one of the officers, whom I particularly liked, one of the officers in the Boys Brigade. The reason I liked him was he was an old boy of my school. He'd played on the wing for the first 15, as I had done. And he was also a very happy Christian, very cheerful man. And I just felt drawn to him. In the providence of God, he is also Muriel Hewitt's cousin. And he's about the same age as Muriel, living in Buckinghamshire, I think now, with his family. So we spoke, and we prayed together. So I put my conversion down to that time. Although I suppose I had been on the way and maybe even had kind of arrived in my own way in believing in Christ and wanting to be his. So I would put it at the age of 16 in 1960 in the camp.
That's a wonderful thing, a testimony from a Christian who lives and is consistent with what they believe. When you became a minister, when you became a Christian, you were in the church, and obviously there would have been a minister at the time. Can you tell us about him?
The minister at the time was Jack Sharman. I started coming to church then in the evenings, probably a little bit in the mornings as well. My parents were okay with that, although I knew they were anxious about what they'd regard as religious extremism. And I know my mother had a branch of that family was a bit over the top in her view, and I can understand that. But they were very content for me to come to church. I started coming morning and evening. Mr. Sharman was the minister. He was a terrific guy, and to read the memories of him and his wife from their daughter was very moving. They'd been missionaries in China, as we've already said. His gift was not preaching. He was a faithful, straightforward preacher. His gift was pastoralia. He was an amazing pastor, as you will have heard from some of the testimonies on screen. So he was the minister, and I'd begun coming morning and evening, and still involved in the Boys Brigade.
So you've actually only had three pastors in your life, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, so Jack Sharman. And then
Yes. Although when I was coming here to the Sunday school in the earliest years, it would have been Glyn Owen, but I didn't know him. We weren't a church family. Yeah. I didn't know him.
So then you were with Vernon Hyam for a long time.
Yes,
Do you want to mention anything about that? Or?
Talk about that, okay. Mr. Hyam came in September 62, and his preaching had a huge impact on us. as a church, I would say, but certainly the young people and the young adults. Muriel had been speaking about Glyn Owen's work amongst the young people, and Vernon's was the same. Kate has said you must say more about that, so I just look up some other notes about Vernon and his time in those early years. His preaching had a great impact on us. It was lucid, as well as being sound, doctrinally sound. He had the lovely gift of bringing those aspects of biblical truth together. The truth, not as a lecture, the warmth, the gospel. What I remember about those early years really is the two things that became emphasized were salvation and sanctification. Those are the drums I remember being beaten. And interestingly, the young people's, as I recall it, in those immature years in one's life, it kind of divided into two. There were some who said, so this is what it's all about. I don't like it. And they went. Or they hung about. And there were others who said, wow, is this what it's all about? And were excited and gripped by the message. And then, as some of you may know, a lot of you may not, after 18 months with us, he became profoundly ill. It was a dangerous form of asthma. And one night he became profoundly ill, had to be rushed to hospital, and was told he had about 6 months to live. And then I think it became maybe 18 months. Well, he was in his mid-30s then. He died just before he was 90. So an astonishing story, really, of him being kept and for many years really not able to do much else but preach. Climbed slowly into the pulpit, preached with much power, and would go home. Don't say he didn't visit, but he was pretty disabled for quite a long time. And of course, some of you will know, in that first illness came his first hymn, I Saw a New Vision. And he went on to write many other hymns. The gift seemed to have been given to him at that time, and it remained with him. And his hymns are very lovely, as some of us will recall, and still in our hymn books. And then, many years later, the Reverend Graham Harrison in Newport opened a newly built church. His church in Newport, Baptist Church, had been demolished with a revamping of the whole area, and they'd had the new church built. They had two opening services. One was Vernon preaching in the afternoon, and the other was Lloyd Jones in the evening. And in between the services, Dr. Lloyd Jones, Mr. Hyam, was speaking in the vestry. And Vernon would talk about, as he often asked the doctor this, I can't carry on, I'm too unwell and so on. And the doctor always encouraged him to keep going. And so the doctor said, let's pray about it. And he prayed for Vernon's health, and in the vestry in this church, now Emmanuel Baptist, and the Lord came, and they just sat in the warmth of his presence. And Vernon never had that illness afterwards. Neither of them ever claimed healing, but it was really just no fuss, which is how it always should be, no fuss. So then his health somewhat improved, although he still had to be very careful. So there. That's my time of Vernon Hyam. And then, if I'm going wittering on, please stop me.
You carry on. It's all good.
And then, in 95, I took early retirement from the health service on grounds of redundancy. And when I was thinking, well, what do I do next? Errol Davis heard about what had happened in my work, my secular work, and suggested to Vernon that I should be employed by the church to help him. He was then, I think, 69, never robust, although he worked his socks off. And I was taken on as working for the church in Pastoral, helping him, take him around the place, doing lots of visiting myself. So I kind of had a second career, which lasted about 20 years. And so we were very close. And then he retired, and Wynne came. And so we had a very lovely and loving relationship.
The next question we've got here is, I think you've already given us some, but memorable events, and I guess we should really touch on the secession from the Presbyterian Church.
Yes.
Is that something you can help us with?
Memories, memorable events is the heading, isn't it? Well, it'll be a mix of personal and corporate things, if that's okay. But yes, we seceded on the 1st of January 1971. It was a decision. We were a church of 600 plus members, and I think all but 13 voted in favour of the secession. It was because the denomination had become apostate, and there really was, I didn't really experience it, but Vernon and Errol Davis and others had. There was, it's incredible really, isn't it? There was a real hatred of the gospel, the atoning death of Christ, the resurrection, the depth of our sin, and the need for an atonement. It was just hated, which is an incredible thing to believe. And so we seceded. In the end, as with many things, the secession came over quite a small thing. The denomination said that it was imposing on the churches for each member a fee that would go to the denomination headquarters and then on to the British Council of Churches, which was a thoroughly apostate grouping, including all brands of so-called Christianity. We said, we can't do that. We're not doing that. We're already known as the rebel church because the system of preaching was in Presbyterianism, still is, it's a good system. The last Sunday of the month, the minister goes on rota. So your own minister's preaching elsewhere. You have the rota minister. And we'd already said, no, we're not. We'll pay a fine, but we'll get our own preacher. So we're always a bit rebellious. And we said, we cannot give this contribution to the British Council of Churches, thence to the World Council of Churches. They said, you must. We said, we won't. So there had to be a parting of the ways. So that happened. The church voted for that, 600 or so, apart from 13 who went then off to other Presbyterian churches. I can understand the difficulties. It had been a very wonderful denomination. But we seceded. We kept our confession of faith, which if you're a member here and haven't read, you jolly well read it. It's a wonderful read. Not Schedule 2 and Schedule 1, but the confession of faith. We kept it, and we're still, in essence, in heart and method of government, Presbyterian. It was hard on Vernon. If you've seen the press cuttings around. We weren't all that popular. It was a lovely story for the press to get a hold of, wasn't it? Always is with Christian churches. But there we are. We were blessed in the doing of it, and we became independent. We had, as some of you will know, about 18 months maybe of having to be here 24 hours a day. That's the legal advice we had. Possession being 9/10 of the law. And if members of the denomination had managed to get in and so on, they could have, theoretically, legally perhaps, claimed the building. And according to the regulations, the churches do belong to the denomination. The denomination could say, it is our church. We own it, which they did. And we would say, but we built it. Our members built it. And we've sustained it. And we ain't leaving. And we were big enough to do that. To challenge the denomination, say we're not leaving. So that happened for 18 months. We watched the church, we guarded the church. And then an agreement was reached. And we became Heath Evangelical Church. Ours was the second wedding in it. The first was Alistair and Pat Stewart, Sazra missionaries. So, yes, that was that story, Alistair, the Secession. Probably the major memorable events for those of us who were around at the time. Other things, meeting Kate, my wife-to-be, one Sunday evening, quite out of the blue, in an old people's home, funnily enough. And we're almost ready for one now. Being part of the annual boys' camps, outdoor. I say it wasn't my scene really, but I was very pleased to go to the camps and led them for many years. Very happy camps, very blessed camps in many ways, and boys getting converted, others not, and so on. But they were exciting things to have, and that's still going, and Rhys Roberts now runs them very well down in West Wales. I remember the visits of two Celtic preachers, Douglas Macmillan, and who else? Can you guess? Who else? Ted Donnelly, a Scotsman and an Irishman, and their visits were a great blessing, those of you who have heard them preach. And one particular incident in that, when Douglas was preaching a mission here, I have a feeling that was when Andrew McFarlane was saved. And we had then coming to our church a nuisance of a man called Frank, who was an atheist. And his aim was to mingle amongst us and talk and begin to persuade people against the faith. Douglas had a mission here, and afterwards there was tea in the annex after meetings and coffee, whatever. This man was there. And Macmillan saw him, went to him and said, "You man of the devil, leave this building and never come back." And he went out as meek as a lamb, and has never been seen since. The authority that was there. So remember those things, those two particularly helpful preachers. I remember the shock at suddenly being made an elder at a time of difficulty in the church. Wyn Evans, Brian Clee and me. This just happened. The way you did it then meant you weren't asked, you just were voted to be an elder. The purchase and adaptation of the bakery next door. It's been a lovely provision. And at the time, the bookshop was in Richard Coombs's tailor's shop with a little cafe at the back. And it was Richard who told us, I suppose the traders in the street had relationships with each other, that the bakery was going to be up for sale because the baker wanted to concentrate on his business in Land of North, I think. So we bought it and we have adapted it, and there's a wonderful provision. Do visit it as often as you can. I had a grandmother who came here, she lived in Allensbank Road, who never became a member, was never sure of her spiritual standing. But as a girl, there was a system around of collecting a penny a brick to build the church. That would have been the church hall, the new church. So she talked to me a little bit about that. And I think for all of us, the life and vision of John Pugh, a remarkable man. Errol has written his story in a very concise, brief, lovely way. And Jean Cannon has written about the sisters of the forward movement. And that's an amazing story as well. And one of our current elders, of course, Richard, he married one of the sisters of the forward movement. Did remarkable works. So reading those things, it's all connected with us and the denomination we were in and the kind of church that we've become. So there you go. Those are my memories. Alistair?
Thank you very much. Can I add that both of those books are available in the bookshop? So get hold of them and read them. Mm-hmm. And there is another book as well, which needs finishing now, doesn't it? Because it only takes us to 2000.
Oh, yes.
So there's Leighton Hargest's history of the church up to the year 2000. So another book well worth getting, and that's free. And there are copies around the place. If you can't find one, come to me. I'll get you one. So the last question that we have is brings us right up to date. What are you praying for our church at this time?
Okay. I pray that we'll grow in the fear and the love of God. I think my sense is, and I'm not talking about here but at all, generally something that has something of the fear of the Lord departed a little bit. I don't know, something I feel deeply about, that both this lovely combination, a God who's to be feared in a right way, and yet a God to be loved, because he's loved us so much. So that we'll grow in the fear and the love of God. Then you could say, Paul's prayers, usually at the beginning of his epistles, they give us a template, I think, for our own prayers. You can sometimes forget, I do. You pray about your family, you pray about this that's coming up, that, which is wonderful that we could do that. But also there are these profound, yet so understandable prayers of the apostle for his churches, to use those as a template for our praying. And always praying, and one does, for the ordinary and normal life of our church and the churches around us. He loves to hear us just talking to him about ordinary things, because Jesus lived in a world of ordinary things. Well, as well as the profundity of his prayers, he was ordinary and understands our own ordinariness. And then I think for a church like ours, which has been taught so well by its ministers over the years, to be careful to keep our first love. In my quiet time, I just started Revelation, and I just read this morning the first of the letters to the churches, Ephesus. A really, really good church. They could suss out heretics. They were sound. They, defended the faith. But there was one thing the Lord had against them. You've forgotten your first love. So easy to do that. So I pray that we will keep or return to our first love. The greatest of these is love. And it must be at the heart of any church As Wynne said this morning, you've got the Bible, you've got the Spirit, and you've got the presence of God and so on. But in it, the key, and we understand this, don't we? God is love. That's what he delights to see in a church. So praying that we will maintain our first love. I think my voice is telling me I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we've gone a little over time. I hope I'm not in trouble for that. But Hal.
Thank you, Keith, for those remarkable memories, and thank you, Alistair, too. So just take as much time as you want to look at the exhibits. Don't forget the Internationals one is also on the other side there, and it'd be lovely if we could get a lot more memories into our memories book. So thank you, everybody.